I'll now ask that the live stream is started.
Okay,
Have we dealt with that sound issue? Okay, thank you. Please can I have confirmation that the live stream has started?
Yes, Chair, we've started.
Great, thank you, and welcome to this meeting of Cabinet. In addition to the Cabinet members and the other councillors present in the room, we also have some councillors joining our meeting remotely. So I'll now check that they can hear us and we them. And we have Councillor Ginman.
Yes, thank you. I can see and hear you.
Councillor Lester.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Yes, I can see and hear you, and welcome. Hello, everyone.
Councillor Tyler.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Harvey. I can see and hear you.
Councillor Swinglehurst.
Good afternoon, Councillor Harvey. Yes, I can hear and see you. Thank you.
Councillor Hardwick.
Good afternoon, Councillor Harvey. Yes, I can see and hear you clearly.
Councillor Howells.
Yeah, good afternoon, Councillor Harvey. I can see and hear you too.
Thank you. And any more? No? Have I missed anybody? No, I think that's everyone. Just wanting to double check on group leaders. Do we have Councillor James?
No, he sends his apologies.
Right. I think Councillor Fagan may be late. We've had apologies from Councillor Matthews. Councillor Ginman, you're representing, you've got two hats on, Cabinet Support and Group Leader for the Independents for Herefordshire. Do we have Councillor Stark for one of the scrutiny committees, Environment and Sustainability?
No, not at present, Chair.
And Councillor Balderson?
No.
No, okay, that's fine. And we also have a number of officers who are attending today who will be introduced as they're called upon. So thank you. I'll now formally open the meeting. The agenda papers and other relevant information for the meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and making a recording. To ensure that the recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Microphones should be muted when you are not speaking. Please ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record our public meetings, providing that it does not disrupt the business. As we move through the agenda, in addition to discussion by Cabinet members, I will invite group leaders or their representatives, where appropriate, to provide views and questions from their group on each item. Where appropriate, I will also call on scrutiny chairpersons to comment on behalf of their committees. And Councillor Howells, I'll just give you notice that I know that the item on the progress report for the Children's Transformation Programme hasn't been to your committee, but I will be offering you the opportunity to comment on it when it comes to it, if you would like.
Yeah, I understand that. Thanks very much.
Voting will be undertaken by a show of hands in the room, and only Cabinet members physically present in the room may vote. So coming formally to item number 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. Have we had any apologies notified to the clerk?
Members of the Cabinet, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Hitchener, And as we previously noted, also apologies from councillors Matthews and James.
Okay, I've also received apologies from Councillor Davies. Okay, item number 2, declarations of interest. Are there any Schedule 1, Schedule 2 or other interests for items on the agenda today? No? Well, if anything comes up, do please alert us and we'll deal with it at the time. Agenda item number 3, minutes of the last meeting, to approve and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of April 2022. We've had no matters of accuracy that have been notified to the monitoring officer. And Cabinet members, are you content that the minutes are an accurate record? Okay, we have everybody in the room voting on that. Thank you. That's great.
Okay.
Item number 4, to receive any questions from members of the public. I understand that we have 6 questions from members of the public for this meeting, and a response to each has been published as a supplement to the agenda papers. Those members of the public who submitted questions have the opportunity to submit a written supplementary or to join the meeting to ask their question live. I will now ask the clerk to confirm if a supplementary question is to be asked for each of the questions. The question number 1, we have had supplied anonymously. Do we have a supplementary question for question number 1?
Yes, I believe the questioner has a supplementary question and is present to ask it, Councillor Harvey.
Excellent. Could you ask the questioner, please, to get to a microphone and get themselves comfortable? Ready when you are, questioner.
In my written question, I asked, how long is a reasonable delay between the council being alerted to safeguarding risk to children and the council taking action to prevent avoidable harm? I asked it because over 9 months ago, I set out clearly in writing why the council's current policy and practice in one area of safeguarding is both harmful and unlawful. I gave the written legal analysis to a senior officer in this council in August 2021. To date, no officer has been able to counter my legal argument that the council's policy and practice in this area is harmful and unlawful. And yet the council has not changed their policy and practice. Senior officers are at pains to say that the council's response to safeguarding risks has changed, but in this area, the drift and delay identified by Judge Kean seems to be alive and well. How long is a reasonable delay between the council being alerted to a policy and practice which discriminates against girls and the council taking action to prevent unlawful discrimination?
Thank you, questioner, for your supplementary. Councillor Toynbee.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so the written question received a very general answer because it was a very general question. On the more specific issue, I just want to say, yes, it deserves a written answer and you will get a written answer. And I just want to say, I do understand what's behind this question and the issues about girls safeguarding and protecting victims. And I am seeing the Chief Executive tomorrow. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Do we have a supplementary from Mr. McKay?
Yes, we do. He has sent that in his written form, so I'll read that off his behalf. He asked, could you kindly give some indication of when we may hope to view this integrated map of highways, public rights of way and open spaces online?
Shall I go for it, Deputy Leader?
Yes, Councillor Harrington, please do.
So I don't have an answer for that, but I'll get one from Mr. McKay, and I'll make sure that comes to with him within the week.
Thank you. Ms. Liddell?
I'm here if you'd like me to put it in person.
Yes, please. If you can make your way to a microphone and make yourself comfortable.
Yeah, sorry, I sent it in because I wasn't sure I'd get here. Yes, you're right that the broader definition of domestic abuse removes some of the emphasis on gendered abuse. But the question I'd like to put now is, to what extent does the council acknowledge that women's inequality is still a major cause of domestic abuse?
And Councillor Crockett.
Thank you. Thanks for that supplementary question. We take inequality at its face value. We do not support inequality in any realm. So we are following all the guidelines. And if you have had a chance to look at the domestic abuse policy, we have really addressed inequalities in that document. And I think it's an organic document that will change every year. So we will continue to look at inequalities.
Thank you. Can I just say that I could ask my colleague's question, she wasn't able to make it, which is Rebecca Farkas.
Yes, is it all right? We'll take question number 6 out of order.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. It was submitted late. Thank you.
Yeah, we did just have a slight issue, Councillor. Ms. Farkas did respond with a written supplementary, but it was after the deadline. So just a question of whether you're willing to accept a supplementary question asked in the room on her behalf.
I think we'll give it a go.
Okay, thank you. So my supplementary is there not an argument for medium-term considerations when deciding on investment in domestic abuse services?
I'm sorry, did you say, is there not an argument?
Yes.
For?
Well, your answer was that intervening and supporting effectively with for children may reduce longer-term costs, but it is a secondary consideration. So my supplementary question is there not an argument for considering medium-term issues about resourcing when you're deciding on investments in domestic abuse services?
Yes, there is, and we will be looking at it in the future, definitely.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, we did, we would like to include everybody, so thank you for representing Ms. Farkas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, do we have a supplementary from Ms. Melia?
Yes, we do, Chair, and that's a written supplementary. She says, how is it possible to develop an effective domestic abuse strategy, including a focus on perpetrators as one of the 4 priorities, without an understanding of the profile of perpetrators?
Councillor Crockett.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Melia. What I'd like to do is point out to you the 4 priorities, and we can get you a written answer to that one because it's quite in depth.
Thank you, Councillor Crockett. And finally, Dr. McLean.
Again, we have a written supplementary. Will the priority in the domestic abuse strategy on provision of services to victims and the priority on perpetrator programmes be in competition for limited resourcing?
Councillor Crockett.
No, we don't have any limitations. We will look at everything fairly.
Thanks very much. Is that the end of our questions? Yes, I think it is. Next item is to receive any questions from councillors, but I don't believe we've received any questions from members. Okay, at this point, I'd like to say that I'm proposing to change the advertised running order of the meeting in order to consider item 11, which is promoting safety, the Herefordshire Domestic Abuse Strategy 2021 to 24, to have that first on the agenda, given that we've had a number of members of the public asking questions who've attended in the room who are interested in this item. And the rest of the agenda will continue in its published order after we've covered this strategy. So I'd like to move then next to item numbered as 11 on the agenda, promoting safety and a Herefordshire secure strategy for tackling domestic abuse in 2021 to 24. And what we're being asked for here is to approve the final draft of the strategy for Herefordshire covering 2021 to 24 in accordance with the requirements of the Domestic Abuse Act 2021. And this item begins at page 101 in the agenda pack. And Councillor Crockett, would you please introduce this item to us?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for accommodating the change of the agenda. It's a shame that the two ladies in question have had to leave, but we'll continue anyway. I'm pleased to present the final draft of this Promoting Safety Herefordshire Strategy for Addressing Domestic Abuse 2021 to 24. As you remember, hopefully, Cabinet reviewed the draft strategy in October last year. And whilst the overall shape and structure of content is unchanged, there have been significant consultation work undertaken which has led to improvements being made. The consultation and engagement has been carried out within the community, local providers, and with people who have lived experience of domestic abuse and victim survivors. The engagement with people with lived experience of domestic abuse and victim survivors is continuing. The information gathered through this process will be used to inform future service delivery. The Domestic Abuse Act 2021 made it a statutory requirement that all local authorities develop and publish an up-to-date strategy. This is to be reviewed on a 3-yearly basis. The Domestic Abuse Needs Assessment is appended to this strategy. There is also a strategy requirement for the Domestic Abuse Act 2021, and this will be reviewed and refreshed annually. The Multi-Agency Local Partnership Board has been formed and has positive engagement from key partners, stakeholders, and victim survivors. There are a range of outcomes in the strategy. These have been given more prominence in the final draft version of this document. The Local Partnership Board is responsible for monitoring and measuring progress contained in these outcomes. Hereford Council has an existing contract with West Mercia's Women's Aid, the delivery of refuge accommodation and support. This contract was commissioned in 2019 and runs till 2020. The government have provided funding to help local authorities deliver all of the duties in the Domestic Abuse Act 2021, and this funding is issued annually too. The funding is used to commission services and will be subject to a separate Cabinet member decision. Officers are in the process of reviewing existing programmes and activities funded last year, as well as looking at wider opportunities. The Local Partnership Board is a statutory requirement and has regular meetings with good membership and attendance, including representation from people with lived experience of domestic abuse. The Department of Levelling Up, Housing and Communities have set a very challenging deadline of January 2022 for final strategies to be published. And they have recognised that most local authorities had challenges to meet the deadline, but they were content with Hereford Council's timetable of delivery. All local authorities are required to report to DLUHC on an annual basis to ensure compliance with and delivery of the Domestic Abuse Act. There are several changes in this summary. For a start, there are language changes throughout the document. We have highlighted outcome summary for each priority, that is in section 7. We have noted the emphasis changes on rurality in Herefordshire, with further detail on specific challenges faced by the communities and how we can address these. That's in section 9.6. Talk Community has been an additional detail added to outline the strategic aims of Talk Community and their relationship to domestic abuse, and their work continues with these communities. What I will conclude with is that we need to raise awareness and understanding about the devastating impact of domestic abuse on victims and their families. Domestic abuse is not only a physical violence, but can also be emotional, controlling, or coercive and economic abuse. We have several officers with us today, and I welcome any comments or questions.
Anything further from officers before I turn to cabinet members? No, in that case, Councillor Toynbee, you're first with your hand up.
Yeah, thanks very much for this. Sometimes it's difficult for these. Sometimes the strategies don't quite get across how strongly we feel about this. There's a lot of background and data and stuff like that. So I think it's important that we stress that as a cabinet, we really do have a strong determination to do something about this and to make sure that the governance is clear, because it's frustrating when lots of different agencies are involved. But it's really good. I'm particularly pleased to see that Women's Aid was so involved in drawing this up, and that they have those collections with people with direct experience of domestic violence. It's always frustrating that funding from government is so often short term. It makes it very difficult to plan. That's very frustrating. Obviously, in my role, I'm particularly interested in school-based programmes and prevention, and I'm going to do what I can to support that. And we had Michael Conroy doing some work with his Men at Work, which is brilliant, and I'd like us to see more of that. And I'm very pleased to see that we're going to have people in MASH as well, working with teams and training social workers and family support workers to recognise early signs of domestic violence. So thanks very much.
Councillor Tyler.
Yes, Councillor Harvey. I just welcome this domestic abuse strategy, and thank you to officers for bringing this to us at the moment. I'd just like to outline that the Community Safety Partnership has recognised the importance of domestic abuse and violence against women and girls. And this is one of our strategic priorities for the next 3 years, making sure that we sort of enable and work with partnership across the board so we can safeguard and we can sort of prevent what is happening, as well as mentioning the talk community, so we can reach out to our vulnerable in our society. And then hopefully we can support families that critically need this support going forward. So thank you to officers, and I look forward to working in partnership through the Community Safety Partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any more members of Cabinet wanting to speak on this? In that case, this is something that has come to scrutiny. So, Councillor Swinglehurst, do you have any comments that you wish to make now on behalf of your committee?
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Yeah, I'll just say a few things if I may. So the recommendations and responses are in the report at Appendix 4. And I would like to thank the executive on behalf of the Scrutiny Committee for their positive response to all of the recommendations, including recommendations around language and the challenges of rurality. The committee felt that there was potential around the talk community, increased integration and holistic approach, including support within communities, a sort of a wraparound. So I'm really gratified to see that this aspect is going to be picked up by the local partnership board. There was also a strong feeling with the committee that we needed to challenge the assumption that the victim survivor should leave the home. And again, very pleased to see that we do have provision within Herefordshire with the sanctuary scheme to enable victim survivors to remain in the home, supported and enabled to do so through increased security. And the committee also felt very strongly it was important to get, and I know this is something Councillor Swainby's picked up on immediately, around education and information. Because there still persists, I think, the misconception that domestic abuse is physical violence, and it's really important that we get the message across consistently that it is not so, and that it includes psychological, emotional abuse, controlling, coercive and threatening behaviour, economic abuse, financial, digital and online abuse, and that we make sure this message is out there in our schools so that our young people are aware. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Swinglehurst. And I'll turn now to group leaders. Councillor Lester, I think across the meeting today, I'm inclined to come to you first on every occasion. So
that's very kind.
I'm just warning you.
No, that's very kind. Thank you for the heads up, and I appreciate it. No, the Conservative group, we really welcome this strategy. Domestic abuse has dreadful consequences for all involved, and it's absolutely critical that this council has a strategy to deal with these issues that we must address. We welcome the contribution that the Scrutiny Committee has made, and I think, as we've just heard from Councillor Swinglehurst, there are some important additions to make to encompass this issue that we have to face. Glad that it's a revised document, but I think this will always be a living document, and it's good to see that further work has gone on to incorporate new aspects, and the issue will sadly we'll never be rid of the issue, but if we have a good strategy, then we're halfway there to making sure that we're on the front foot to dealing with these matters. The one challenge I have for Councillor Crockett, and it's for anyone who promotes a strategy like this in any aspect of the council, and I know I've had experience of promoting strategies myself, is we've got the partnerships on board, but how is the council going to actively promote this strategy so that it's embedded as a key thing that people are aware of, that's what the council is focused on? It's a challenge, but that's the question we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lester. Councillor Fagan.
Thank you. Yeah, we, on behalf of the Green Party, we note this report and the importance of education in the sort of strategy forward. Councillor Lester mentioned quite a few points that we support. Thank you. And Councillor Ginman.
Yes, thank you very much. On behalf of the Independents for Herefordshire, clearly we recognise this as a crucial report, but as Councillor Lester has quite rightly said, its proof will be in practically implementing it, and we will work very hard to ensure that that should happen. May I please quickly, on a personal note, and I declare as a veterinary surgeon, very pleased to see that the earlier draft that I saw, this now does include that important aspect of animal abuse, the connection between animal abuse child abuse and domestic abuse is now extremely well proven. It's a Venn diagram of interaction. And in fact, during the COVID lockdown period, the evidence is now emerging of the importance of that actual, the particular aspects of all of that have increased. And it is really important that when looking at the human side, people make a point of working with those in the animal areas, because the one can be a very marked indicator for the others. And I look forward to seeing how we might take that forward, because it's not sometimes the easiest ways to achieve that with the animal sector. It's not one that necessarily the council is directly or quite so directly involved. It may well be that we have to have partnership into the private sector to achieve some of that, and of course with the RSPCA and other charities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ginman. Councillor Lester, you're coming back for a second bite.
No, Councillor Harvey, under the Hitchener cabinet system, we were allowed questions. So I put a question to Councillor Crockett. How are you going to actively promote the strategy? Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Lester. We're going to try and spin this out as much as possible. I don't know whether, Paul, you want to add something to that, or Ewan, you're both on the
yes,
call.
I'm happy to Councillor, if I may, Ewan Archibald. So yes, the new strategy will be published on the council's website, of course. It will also, I think, we'll have links to other key websites, including the Talk Community Directory. We'll be working with our key partners, including West Mercia Police and the Police and Crime Commissioner and Probation Service, also promote it through their channels. We'll be working with our communications team to publicise the launch of the strategy and to promote it in on a number of media and social media channels. The role of the partnership board is key here also, as it represents a wide range of stakeholders, including many people with lived experience as victim survivors. And we hope that they will use their channels, including word of mouth, to promote awareness of, and on the principle that Councillor Lester has enshrined, challenge to ensure that we do actually deliver on all aspects of the strategy. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Lester. Right, in that case, I'd like us to turn to the recommendations for Cabinet members, which are as follows. That A, the final draft of Promoting Safety, Herefordshire's Strategy for Addressing Domestic Abuse 2021 to 2024 be approved for implementation. B, the responses from the recommendations made by the Scrutiny Committee in Appendix 4 of this report are approved. And C, approval of updates to the strategy and the associated needs assessment be delegated to the Director of Community Wellbeing in consultation with Cabinet members during the lifetime of the strategy. So can I have an indication from Cabinet members present in the room, those in favour? Right, we have a majority there. I think we might be unanimous. Couldn't see everybody's hand. Apologies. Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Moving swiftly on, we're leaping back up the agenda to item number 6, which is the Children Improvement Plan and the progress update on that. So this item is to provide an update to Cabinet on the Children's Improvement Plan. This item begins at page 21 of the published agenda pack. And Councillor Toynbee, over to you. Would you please introduce this important item?
Yes, thanks very much. Yeah, I'm very pleased to introduce this new version of the Children's Improvement Plan. And I'm very pleased that we received a lot of input when we put it out for comments from partners, from organisations, from individuals, from social workers, from teachers, from schools. So I was really, really pleased to hear from so many people, and a particular emphasis that a lot of people raised was early help, which I know that we all really value. So I think we've got more emphasis on that now, which I'm really pleased about. it's also useful to remember that as far as our conversations with the Department for Education and Ofsted are concerned, you know, these are ongoing. We're in conversation with them all the time, not just with improvement board meetings and those sort of conversations. So this week, as we know, there's been an awful lot about children's social care in the media. We had the McAllister review that came out on Monday, Josh McAllister, which was commissioned by the government, which has got some quite controversial recommendations, and I recommend that you all have a look online. There are some very useful summaries of the recommendations. One of the recommendations is scrapping IROs, independent reviewing officers, which is very controversial. They are obviously in our improvement plan, so maybe that'll change, but personally I think it might not. And then I think it was this morning that the reviews were published into the deaths of little Arthur and Star. So this is very, very high profile nationally this week. And I'm really pleased that we're coming up with an updated plan for all of you, for the whole council, for the county, which has had so much impact from many of our residents. Thanks very much. And over to you, Darren.
Thank you, Councillor Timebin, and good afternoon, Cabinet. I'm Darryl Freeman, Corporate Director, Children and Young People. So the paper is what is, if you recall, Cabinet previously asked for a quarterly update into the current position on the Children's Improvement Plan and progress. And this paper is part of that sequence. You will receive another paper in July, which will be linked to the transformation paper, and an update regarding the transformation funds that were agreed by Council at the end of March. So this document doesn't reference the transformation funding or an update on that. You'll see that separately in due course. Again, I won't take you through every detail in the paper. You're very familiar with the background to why we have an improvement plan and the funding streams associated with that. The draft copy of version 2 is exactly that in terms of when this paper was written, which is about 4 weeks ago. And since, as Councillor Toynbee has indicated, has received considerable input from a wide range of stakeholders, groups, organisations, including those working with and representing service users, as well as from a number of members in scrutiny and Cabinet and across the Council. So the version that we have this week and are finalising looks different to the version that you got, which is a snapshot in time as a draft. And also you'll note from the draft that you received, many of the measures that matter were either kind of speculative or blank. The version that will be signed off this week and next will then be published. It will go to Children's Scrutiny Committee, and of course will be appended to the report that you will see in July too. So you'll see the later version and the final version of the plan shortly. Just in terms of some key elements, so that we are subject of a non-statutory improvement notice from the Department for Education. That's been in place now for 12 months. So we recently had our second 6-month review. Progress was noted, as were the significant rise in demand that we saw in the autumn last year and into the early part of this year. It was no surprise that the service remains the focus of a non-statutory improvement, and we've been told very clearly that will continue until such time as Ofsted have been inspected us, and we have a plan following the outcome of that inspection. So there's no expectation on our part that we will not be the focus of an improvement plan, and it's my view that we benefit from the support and the focus and attention that we receive from the Department for Education. You'll recall that we received £1.7 million in grant money from the Department for Education in the last financial year. That had to be spent by the end of that financial year. We spent almost all of it, a small amount being underspent, and that grant was used to support and accelerate improvement activity and enabled us to move faster and further in relation particularly to some of our work around developing the early help offer and integration with Talk Community. We have our annual conversation coming up early next month with Ofsted. That's an opportunity, which is part of the inspection framework, where with senior officers and our Ofsted colleagues, we meet to discuss the current position and progress with regard to education schools, early years, 16 SEND and further education as well as social care. And again, when we bring an update to you in July, we'll report back on the focus and outcomes of that conversation. It remains the case that we expect to be the focus of an Ofsted inspection at some point in this year. That's because it's a 4-year cycle and we're due for an inspection, and again, all we will have when it actually happens is 1 week's notice. So that hasn't happened yet. It will almost certainly follow at some point, the annual conversation, and we'll update you in due course. We recently made, following interviews at the end of April, we made appointments to 2 service director posts, and I can announce today that Phil Bullingham was appointed permanent service director for quality assurance and improvement. And Phil starts with us next week on Wednesday, the 1st of June. And Rachel Gillett was appointed permanent service director for social care and early help. And she'll likely start at the beginning of July. So we've got inductions planned for each of those, and I'm sure you'll be meeting them in due course. Appendix 2 of the report outlines some of the key areas of improvement that we're seeing and that have been recognised by the Department for Education and the Improvement Board. I'm particularly pleased that we've seen significant reduction in average caseloads for social workers, and particularly so in the assessment teams, where we saw acute pressures at the end of last year and early part of this year, and also a good rise in the frequency of personal and case supervision. So without manageable caseloads and without good and regular supervision, then our ability to deliver good and safe practice is hindered. And we're very much seeing now that the bedrocks of improvement and improved practice are starting to show and show consistently. The Corporate Parenting Board, when we wrote this report, had met on the 27th of April and had started a piece of work with the Local Government Association to do a self-evaluation. Corporate Parenting Board met again yesterday under its new format, had a really constructive meeting focused on the health needs of looked after children and some powerful representation and input from a group of young people through Your Voice Matters. We've got the LGA in the building yesterday and today doing a diagnostic of our looked after children's services, and I'll receive feedback from them later this afternoon. And of course, again, I'll update you in due course. And I think that probably is a summary of the detail of the paper. I'm very happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Daryl. Before I open this up to Cabinet members, this is the first business meeting that we've had since the Council's coverage on Panorama, and I'd like to make a brief statement on that. I'm sure that many of you will have seen the recent media coverage on our children's services, and I'd like to acknowledge the concerns raised by residents and councillors, and to thank those who have been in touch with us since to raise specific concerns following their experience with our children's services. Each day, there are children in Herefordshire who need to be protected and families who need our support. Alongside other agencies, we want to be able to offer the right help at the right time, and families should be able to trust that we will get it right for them. We now have a new leadership team in place and have pledged almost £22 million in this year alone of additional funding for the staff and the resources that are needed to create a service that we can all be proud of. We are 1 year into a 3-year plan to improve services for children and families by reducing caseloads on social workers, recruiting more staff for home visits, providing better leadership and supervision of our staff, and by modernising our systems. We are absolutely committed to supporting families and protecting vulnerable children in our community. And this continues to be this Council's and this Cabinet's #1 priority. And with that, I'm very happy to open up the discussion and questions to members of the Cabinet. Anybody? Councillor Chowns.
Thanks, Councillor Harvey, and thank you, Councillor Toynbee, and thank you, Darryl, for this report. I don't have a question. I just really want to recognise the work that's gone into this and really welcome the shift in focus towards outcomes rather than just activities. And I'm really, really pleased to see the progress that's outlined in Appendix 2 in terms of things like reduction in social worker caseload and increased frequency of, supervision and so forth. I think that's so important. So the focus that this report outlines on measures that matter, the focus it outlines on outcomes, I think really give assurance that this is a plan that sets the direction we need to be going in. As Councillor Harvey said, children's safety and wellbeing is absolutely of the utmost importance, top priority for us. And I feel confident that this plan sets the right direction and targets. And I'd also just like to thank everybody who is working in children's services in Herefordshire to help keep children safe, because it is a really difficult job and so, so important. And I just want to thank all those working in the Directorate for the skill and the dedication and the commitment and the effort that they put into that, and the compassion that they put into that really vital work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chowns. Any other Cabinet members? Okay. Well, as I said near the top of the meeting, that this report hasn't been to our Children's Scrutiny Committee, but this is such a super important topic that I really want to make sure that we give scrutiny every opportunity to comment along the way. So, Councillor Howells, if you would like to comment on the report, please do so.
Yes, thank you. I had trouble unmuting. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would like to make some points, and thanks for the opportunity. As you say, it's not been scrutinised by Children's Scrutiny yet, but it will be on the next scrutiny meeting, which is on the 21st of June. So I'll not attempt to preempt, obviously, that meeting, but I think the three important points just to make. Obviously, confirm the Director's Progress Report on Children and Young Persons Scrutiny Committee actions and the next steps in our scrutiny process on that. In his paragraph 19 of his report, and I quite agree with what he says there. Secondly, we've already said that we need to see specific key metrics when we do the quarterly scrutiny of the updates, as this is. And I'm pleased to see that there is work already in progress being made on the measures that matter, which reflects exactly what we've already said we'd like to see, and some specific items on that that obviously show that we're looking how actually we make sure that we are making the improvements that we would need to see, and the ones that reflect what Ofsted have said we need to be looking at. So in looking at the impact of the improvement plan to date, I did notice and pleased to see some significant improvements, I think, as the Director's already mentioned, on some of the key metrics we've already identified that we'd like to see. And I'm sure the committee will welcome when we come to scrutinise improvements, particularly on the caseload reductions average, which are clearly quite significant. The increased work and case supervision, that's obviously important too. And the timeliness of child protection conferences and the Children Protection Plan statutory visits, all those are showing significant increases, and that's obviously welcome and good indication that the improvement plan is starting to bite very significantly. And I think that's all I'd like to say at the moment. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Howells. And now turning to group leaders, Councillor Lester, you're warned and in the starting blocks.
Thank you very much. Yes, of course, we welcome the report, and unlike the last time where I made the point that it was very difficult from the last update to see any qualitative changes, the performance report gives you clear statistics of the improvements, and that's very welcome. When we look at the visits, supervisions, the caseloads, and the conferences, and those statistics are very, very encouraging. I was going to start off by saying I think it's really important that any strides forward are family focused. It's always key in the talk to say we've got to put children first, and that's absolutely right. But it has to be with supporting that family, because ideally that's where children deserve to be, within families. And so we can write as though it's the child that matters, but it's the child in the context of the family that's critical to ensure that they live that normal life and as normal as possible. So it's good, I think, reading this strategy, the improvement plan, there's the talk there of working with families, and I think that's absolutely key, and we welcome that. What other things I was going to mention, and I picked up on Councillor Toynbee's talk about the idea of getting away from independent assessments by other colleagues, the IRO reports, as they say. I can understand why that's controversial. Don't necessarily have a view on that, in that it doesn't matter essentially how the decision making is reassessed or sore-thumbed or checked, but it's absolutely vital that there is that process. And I think that's key, because once our staff are acknowledged as making in these reports, and there is good decision making, but once these decisions are being looked at, and if it can be shown that these are good quality decisions, that gives confidence to the workforce to continue doing the extremely difficult job they have to do. So I would like to see more information coming forward about the decision making, so that we can have this confidence that those decisions are being made, and then that way there'll be another metric that we can assess the improvement by. But very interesting to know that IRO reports may be done away with, but interested to know how that will be replaced. But if we can have further information along those lines moving forward, then I think that would be welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lester. Any questions? No. Great. Councillor Fagan.
Yeah, thank you. The Green Group, we note the contents of the report. It's felt that obviously rebuilding trust is going to take some time, and that once we see the evidence of that happening, it will reflect the change of culture within the children's services within Herefordshire. We acknowledge that we're at a very low starting point. It's good to see that multi-agency early help offer needs to be further developed, and this emphasis on families is absolutely so crucial. And it will be interesting to see what when the Let's Talk Children and Families is published in June, what the view of children and people who've been consulted is as a sort of developing point for us to work on the issue of family support in Herefordshire. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fagan. Councillor Ginman.
Thank you. On behalf of the Independents for Herefordshire, pleased to see this happening. Clearly it had to. It's a case of we've started from a particular point which none of us would wish to be at, but we're now tackling this and showing real determination for change. And I think major thanks to all that are involved in taking this in hand and working with it, and to those social workers who are quietly getting on with the job all the time while this is happening. I think it's always important that we make sure that we give support to them, because they're doing the job, they're at the coalface. Sometimes the words and the strategies can lose sight of those who are hands-on. So a considerable thanks there. One particular point I would like to pick up on is the importance of cross-border. We talk about it being Herefordshire, but we have to remember a lot of our population live or are at school across the border into Powys or into Monmouthshire, into Gloucestershire, into Worcestershire and Shropshire. It really is important, therefore, that when we're setting up these strategies, that there is good consultation and discussion with those who surround us and are our neighbours, because there is an awful danger of dropping between two different regimes and council areas otherwise. So pleased to see it. Look forward to reading and seeing more progress on this. And thank you very much to all who are working so hard on it.
Thank you, Councillor Ginman, for those comments. Right, if there are no further comments from anybody, I'll move to the recommendations for Cabinet members, which are as follows. That Cabinet A, reflect on the progress and impact of improvement activity, and B, note the development of version 2 of the improvement plan. And can I have Cabinet members indicating support for those two recommendations? Thank you in the room. And with that, we move on. The items 7 and 8 on today's agenda are two related reports, really closely related reports, which under the circumstances, I propose that we do kind of debate together, with Cabinet members voting on each item separately at the end of the debate. Item 7 we have is on nutrient certainty. As a competent body under the Habitats and Species Regulations 2017, Cabinet is asked to note the progress being made towards creating integrated wetlands, phosphate reduction, and steps being taken to ensure nutrient certainty to the required standard of beyond reasonable scientific doubt. And this item begins at page 71 in the agenda pack. We also have the related item following item 8, which is the phosphate credit pricing and allocation policy. And Cabinet is also asked to consider the proposed pricing arrangements for phosphate credits, which is an interim allocation policy pending a full allocation policy, and to note the proposed phosphate credit allocation policy. And this item begins on page 77 of the agenda pack. And Councillor Harrington, would you please introduce this item and any officer presentation?
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Yes, I will briefly-ish introduce this. I'll then hand over to the officer who's been charged of this project, Rachel Joy. I want to also thank officers who have been involved in this project over some months, if not years, including Mr. Willamont, who essentially started this journey off as a way of us providing some mitigation for the moratorium that we find ourselves in. I also want to thank Councillor Swinglehurst, who's here in the room today, for her role that she has played, not only as a chairman of the new chair of the Nutrient Management Board, but as being a supportive and interested advisor, highly appreciated. As Councillor Harvey has said, we'll take these two reports together for discussion, but both separately. One is on nutrient certainty and one is on the phosphate pricing allocations policy. There are a variety of different recommendations to note or to agree or to approve in here. We have brought these to the council because although we haven't yet got the final legal advice on certainty, we have everything lined up to achieve that, and we need simply to get some further QC council's advice. What we didn't want to do is delay this any further. We wanted to put this in the public domain to make people aware of the amount of work that has gone on, the certainty that we have achieved, to allow developers and other builders to understand the process and to start to engage with us as we go along this process. What we have here is a mechanism of wetlands which allows us to strip phosphate out of the river. We have, well, out of the sewage discharge before it goes into the river. We have in Herefordshire, in the Lug, excess of phosphates in the river. We know that this is mitigation. I think it's important to remember this. Because we've got a moratorium as a result of the Dutch case, we have not been able to build in the north of the county for nearly 2 years. In fact, close to 2 years. And as a result of that, we have lost a tremendous amount of income to the county. And we know that our builders and developers have struggled to the tune potentially of £200 million. And so whilst we are not responsible for the health of the rivers as a county, that is unfortunately the jurisdiction of the Environment Agency and Natural England and other statutory agencies, and the responsibility, quite frankly, of the government. We are, as the permission giver, we are responsible, and we are the ones who essentially have to say no to developers when they want to build in an area that is under a moratorium. It's also important to note that the Y is close to failure, and we have committed stretched council resources and funding from our New Homes bonus, and also the LEP grant to deliver this quite innovative mitigation solution, which, as I said, will allow our building industry a mechanism to which that they can trade and build again. This is not, I think it's important to note, this is not sort of similar to carbon trading, which some people have problems with, in a sense that we are not asking someone to plant a tree in, I don't know, my country of birth, Zambia, so that I can fly somewhere else in the United Kingdom. This is directly connected to the river system. So what we're doing here is we're not allowing phosphate to go into, or in fact, when we're removing phosphate from sewage, from going into the local river system. So we are making betterment to the river, and therefore that is, as far as I'm concerned, acceptable. But it is important to note the distinction between providing a mitigated route to allow our builders to develop land, and to also make sure that we keep the pressure on our government to properly fund our agencies, because quite frankly, that is where the issue is. The buildup of phosphates and nitrates in our rivers has been happening over a slow 10 years or so, and the failure of governments to provide our agencies with the required resource, finance, and officer capacity to make sure that our agriculture and sewage practices are up to date and being monitored, and everyone's being supported and making sure the right practice is being carried out is the great failing. And that doesn't seem to have changed as far as I can see. With that briefish introduction, I shall hand over to Rachel Joy to explain both reports a little bit more technically.
Thank you, Councillor Harrington. Cabinet, officers present, members of the public. This is an important step forward for the council. It's progress, but we're not there yet. I think I'd like to start by taking stock of where we are. We've had an effective moratorium on the on the lug since 2019. And I think we need to be mindful of the position on the Y, where the latest Natural England targets announced in the last 2 weeks place it ever closer to being in the same place. So in taking stock of where we are, we have, as you know, a nutrient management board, ably led, but there is a huge amount of work to do. We still have a lack of clarity at a national level over enforcement and enforcement roles, with the chief executive of the Environment Agency this week saying that he has a lack of clarity with DEFRA. That has an impact here on the ground, because we have hollowed out local agencies in Natural England, the Environment Agency, and we have cross-border issues to tackle as well. And it would be incredibly helpful for a duty of cooperation to be in the relationship of the annual remit letter from the Welsh Government to Natural Resources Wales to aid them and support them. So we sit in the middle of a very difficult national context, under-resourced, which creates an incredible challenge for both the lug and the Y. So these reports today are not about addressing the underlying pollution issue. I think it's important to say, because people get confused about phosphorus, and I have been asked to go into some details, so I will. And Councillor Ginman will know this better than me as an eminent veterinary surgeon. Phosphorus is essential to all human life. It's found in DNA, it's found in RNA. Too much is a bad thing and too little is a bad thing. The growth in food policy, well, the requirement for food policy in the Second World War has led to over commitment of phosphates to our soils, and we have a growing legacy phosphate issue. The growing population that we have has placed strain on our water systems. I think within that taking stock, the local response, when we look at, Farm Herefordshire, we look at the Green Man Group, we have a farming community that is seeking to rise to the challenge. We have water companies with investment programs, but pressure to do more needs to be placed on water companies. So what I'm not presenting today is a solution, but as a council, I would encourage you to remain committed to the Nutrient Management Board, but also to the Phosphate Commission that we are proposing, and continue to work with our partners on developing, to seek an independent review, because ultimately development will only be solved when we get to a place of full river recovery and not before. With that, I'll turn now to the reports in a little bit more detail. We are able to measure how much phosphate leaves a sewage treatment plant, and we're able to know how much reed beds take up in terms of phosphate. And because of that, we can then determine how much is taken out by reed beds. So we're able to measure that. People have done that for years. This is the first time globally anywhere, to my knowledge, that anybody has done that and put a trading scheme on the end of it. And that is why it's taken so long. And I want to acknowledge the impact that this has had on people in the north of the county waiting for their affordable homes, and for the development industry, where we estimate the latest estimates are close to £400 million in lost building. A huge loss of opportunity. Something like 2,200 homes that haven't been able to be approved, including 500 affordable homes, haven't been able to approved. The council has a lower council tax base. It isn't able to meet its affordable housing targets. It's receiving less new homes bonus than it otherwise would achieve. So I think in terms of its human impact on people wanting affordable homes, its economic effect, and its effect on the council, we cannot deny the seriousness of the position we're in, and also for the fish, aquatic life, and other life within the river. So within that context, getting development moving is important. We have put in place a process that is incredibly robust in terms of measuring that. So we are modelling for climate change over the next 70 years. We are modelling for differences in rainfall throughout the year in terms of that. So I would have liked to have got a report to you here today with an appendix that sets all that modelling out, that is agreed by a QC. We are very close to that. I suspect that probably in 3 to 4 weeks' time, we will have that modelling work complete, and we will be able to bring that back to you for consideration. What we therefore didn't want to do in holding that back was hold back the necessary work with developers to start trading. So we can know from the work we've done already that from our first plant at Luston, we will be able to remove 200 kilograms or thereabouts of phosphates from the treated effluent leaving that plant. We'll be able to remove that with these reed beds. 40 kilograms of that will be reserved for what's called river betterment, not dealing with the pollution that's there, but actually making the river better, because it is still for the polluters, whether it's a farm or a water company or highways, to actually sort that out. So 40 kilograms were released for that, and 160 kilograms from the first site released for offset. And because of where Luston is, that will protect the whole of the SAC, so we can get development moving across the whole of the SAC. I'll turn now to the proposals around phosphate credit trading. It would be great to have a policy where we could say, if you're eco-friendly, you meet the county plan, you're ready, willing and able to build now, and we could allocate to that. You could allocate to affordable housing, we could prioritise that. That's a piece of work that will require quite a bit of development. So what we're proposing is a first come, first served policy based on the date that your planning application was first validated. And we're making that public. We've already released that information to developers. We will make that information public on a website so that people can see where they are in the queue. And we will reach out to developers at the head of the queue and start to move through the queue in sequence if you decide to go down that policy route. So the proposal is, until we have a permanent policy, to work on a first come, first served basis. In terms of the pricing of credits, and I know that that has aroused some interest, I want to make clear that the council is not proposing to make any profit whatsoever from the trading of credits. The proposal is to rebalance it over a 3-year period. That said, the council's taking some risk here. We're buying land, we're building it out, we're faced with the same construction inflation that developers are faced with in terms of the cost of doing this going up. And we're also taking some very, very educated assumptions and planning estimates at how much a site will cost to maintain for 80 years, with a lot of uncertainty still around climate change, things like that. So the council's taking a huge amount of risk here. We've had to build that into the price of the credits, but we will rebalance that in 3 years' time in terms of the cost of credits, and we'll come back in 3 years' time with a process to do that, to make sure that we don't profit from it. The pricing of credits you'll see in paragraph 10 of the second report there, and I'm sorry, I haven't got the page number in front of me. These are estimates because every single development will have a bespoke calculation. But typically, if you are in the 77% of homes on the waiting list that will connect to a plant with a phosphate stripper, you will pay £3,500 per house to offset the phosphate that house produces. If you connect to a package treatment plant, and it's a certified one that gives you, say, an 80% reduction, then again, you will be paying about £3,600. And we estimate that about 12% of homes will meet that requirement. If you're in the remaining 11% of homes where you unfortunately have a development that doesn't connect to a PTP, a package treatment plant, or a plant with a phosphate stripper, then your loading is higher. And you'll see that that will cost from this report £10,360 typically. I want to stress, though, that that is only, we estimate, about 11% of homes. 90% of homes will be actually at the 3,500 level in terms of the cost of this, in terms of the pricing of credits. So as I've said, what will happen next if you agree this report is that we can begin contacting developers, talking to them about Section 106 agreements, getting their planning applications up to date in terms of habitat risk assessments, and going through all of the necessary steps, but not trading credits. We can't prejudge that at this stage. We will also continue the work with WOOF, the Wyonosk Foundation, Ricardo Consulting and RQC on all of the necessary measures and protections we need to have in place to bring a report back to you that confirms that we believe we have achieved nutrient certainty. Finally, I want to say a few thank yous. I want to say thank you to the landowner at Luston, who right from day one recognised he was part of the problem and wanted to be a part of the solution. And I think I would encourage other landowners to take the same public-spirited approach when it comes to being part of the county and being part of the community here. I also want to say thank you to Gail and Ellie at the Wyonosk Foundation for the excellent conceptual work. It goes without saying that this, having never been done before, is a huge challenge for the Wyonosk Foundation. And it hasn't been easy. Their conceptual work has been fantastic, and I want to thank them for it. I also want to thank Vivian Evans at Welsh Water for her work to connect all of this, Hayley Fleming at Natural England, and Grace White at the Environment Agency, who have been incredibly helpful in unblocking issues as they've arisen. But long after I've gone, because there will come a day when I'm not here, Kelly Gibbons, your development manager, David Jones, your program manager, and Liz Jubilee, your head of natural and built environment, are the three people that got you this, working late into the night, driven by the fact that people weren't getting their affordable houses. So I will stop at that point and hand over to you, Councillor Harvey, because I know you want to say a few things.
Yes, thank you very much. This is a really important step on the journey, and as you say, Rachel, it's taken an awful lot of people putting in an awful lot of time, effort, and white-hot thinking, goodwill, and cooperation to get us to where we are now, It's a long way further than it was. It's really a credit to everyone involved that we've got as far as this in the time that has ticked away. This is important for our county. This is important for our developers, our local builders, our communities who are waiting for homes, families who are wanting to stay in their communities, it's really good news that we've got this far and a little bit further, and we'll be able to give everybody the really good news that that we can open up for development again, but we're just tantalizingly a little bit away from that. So thank you very much for that presentation. I open it up to the discussion up to Cabinet members first, and then I'll come to group leaders. Councillor Crockett.
Thank you, Chair. Oh wow, what a great job. What an asset Rachel is. As we all know, so much relies on our position with phosphates, and the full river recovery is our priority. We need to get things moving. It has been a long journey and it's still going to continue. I look forward to the modelling completion, Rachel, that'll be an interest. And I hope that this Cabinet can move forward and approve these agenda items today. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you, Councillor Crockett. Councillor Chowns.
Thanks. I'd like to echo the thanks to everybody who's been involved in getting us this far. Like you say, we're tantalisingly close. I really hope we're going to get over the finishing line really soon. And thank you, Rachel, and all the team for getting us so far. Just to echo, I think Councillor Harrington's comments. You know, it is frustrating that the root causes of the pollution are not sufficiently tackled, and that central government hasn't dedicated sufficient funding and effort into tackling them. And I'm really proud that as a council we are doing something that, as Rachel has said, is a global first in trying to address this, because we are so committed to ensuring that we can unlock the moratorium here, which has got in the way of delivery of affordable and all sorts of housing, and had terrible knock-on effects on the rest of our economy and the construction sector in particular. So yeah, very grateful to everybody involved, and very much looking forward to getting to the point of finally being able to open up for trading.
Thank you, Councillor Chowns. Councillor Tyler.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Harvey. It's just overwhelming to see this report and everything that's gone into it. Can I go back to Rachel, what she said? Is it this the first time globally that this has ever been considered for reducing phosphate? If that is the case, then this is something hugely important for the council going forward. We could be exemplar in reducing phosphate, phosphates in our rivers. My only other concern is the section 106 and the length of time that can take to do this for the developers. And I'm just wondering if there's additional resource for the extra workload on the section 106 coming forward now with all the applications that have been put on hold.
Councillor Tyler, thank you for your questions. Firstly, people have built wetlands before and reduced phosphate. What nobody's ever done before is to be able to estimate that in terms of an accurate estimate of what will be achieved over an 80, 90, 100-year period to a level of scientific certainty that would allow you to trade credits on that. And that's the breakthrough that we're on the cusp of actually achieving. In terms of resourcing, it's not just the Section 106 agreement. We've brought in additional capacity into the planning team because obviously developments need to get moving again. We've spoken to Natural England about their role in terms of habitat risk assessments. We have an ecology plan to bring in more resource into the ecology team because it will be necessary there. And we're speaking to legal colleagues about the resource that they might need because having got the breakthrough in terms of credits, we then don't want it to be slowed down unnecessarily by our own administrative processes.
Thank you, Rachel, for that. Thank you.
Yes, hear to that. We don't want to be a narrowing in our own pipe work, not now. It's good to hear we've got the resource in place and prepared for the bulge of work that will inevitably come when we release this and can start using it in anger and gratitude. Any more comments from Cabinet members before I go to group leaders? Councillor Lester.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Yes, there's two parts to this, obviously, because there's two agenda items, but taking them in turn, the Conservative group, we really welcome the wetlands project, and we know there's been a lot of key people doing a great job here, and we thank them collectively. They know who they are, but you know, it's really important, and it's groundbreaking stuff, and it's to be commended to deal with what is a really critical issue for Herefordshire and counties like us with the same problem. So it's great to see that Herefordshire is on the front foot with solutions. So we welcome that and applaud that. With the wetlands project, we have to note that if I recall correctly, we've had £1 million from government to help towards putting towards that project. So thank the government for that. I know earlier comments were made, but that money was put forward in recognition of the challenges that Herefordshire Council faces in trying to be innovative in solving or helping to solve those problems. One question is, seeing as we will have this unique site that's put forward, are there any ways we can use the wetlands to be of benefit in other ways, you know, for members of the public to use, or other ways that environmentally we can improve the situation? That was my one question about the wetlands project. The question we have about the phosphates credit system, so I'll ask that question too. And I think Rachel Joy has very eloquently explained the impact that that freeze on house development has had on the housing industry, and that has had huge financial implications. Excuse me.
Oh,
sorry about that.
That's a Limerick forfeit for that one.
That's a council officer phoning me.
We'll have your Limerick once we stop the live session.
Yeah. The funny thing is my phone's on mute, but not my iPod, so it rings. Anyway, so they're trying again. Can Paul Walker make sure no officers call me whilst I'm in cabinet? I'm sorry, I'll try again. So yes, as I was saying, Rachel had eloquently expressed the impact that this has had on housing developers, and you know, the delay with regard to their building projects. And this does also have an impact for the council in terms of housing delivery and council tax income. So it has a huge knock-on effect. Our concern is, and it's the question that we would put, is have we got the charges right for the credits? Because if these extra costs challenge the viability of schemes, are we going to end up in a situation where some schemes are just not going to be viable for developers to proceed, given that, and also this has been compounded by the fact that there's been such delays? And so Rachel explained somewhat a little bit of the thinking because of the investment that this council is making, but the report doesn't go into any detail as to how those charges have been arrived at. And so the question we have is, are we sure that the charges are set right? Because if it does affect the viability of schemes, then although we're trying to address a big problem, we might be ending up with a greater issue in terms of stymieing developments for different reasons. So that would be our question, as well as the wetlands question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lester. Yeah, I think firstly to deal with the benefits, obviously there will be biodiversity net gain, helpful both to wildlife, flora and fauna. I think each site will be different in terms of public access. We've got some landowners who have basically said, I'll sell you the site for a wetland, but if you want to put an education centre next to my farm, sorry, I'm not selling. You know, and that I'm not picking Luston or, you know, any named site, but that has been a conversation with developers, and we have to be mindful of At the end of the day, if it's a choice between no wetland and a wetland with an education centre, we're going to take the wetland in terms of approach. We would like to see that if it's appropriate. I think what we could get certainly is educational visits, onto most sites. And it's a controlled waste site at the end of the day. We've got treated effluent flowing into beds, with water around in those beds. And I think we have to remember it is a controlled waste site. But it'd be good to have people visiting if it's appropriate. I think on the cost of credits, we have modelled a number of scenarios before, particularly on the maintenance costs. The building costs are probably more known knowns at this stage, and certainly after the first one is built. But the 80-year maintenance costs, we've modelled a number of scenarios on what we might have to do over 80 years. And I have taken that into a star chamber within the council, who have tested me for over an hour on those assumptions to make sure that they're robust before we brought that report forward. I've not put all of the detail in the report on there, but we do have a lot of modelling sitting behind this, Councillor Lester, because obviously I don't want to expose the council to inappropriate risk over the next 80 years in maintaining these. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and just the question really is the developers.
The viability, yes.
The viability, and then have what's been the response from developers in terms of that viability issue.
Okay. I regularly talk to developers at a national and a local level. Most of them have priced these kinds of assumptions in. I do accept that there may be one or two developments that are borderline viable, that this may be an issue for. But typically at 3,500 a credit, well below market expectations. Obviously, if you don't connect to a plant with a phosphate stripper, that's probably above market expectations. But at the moment, it's the only solution in town. What I would like to say is that on my to-do list is actually working with developers, Natural England, our own planning service, to actually begin to think about how we could bring more private schemes forward and actually unlocking that as a solution as well. Because the council's doing this voluntarily, but actually there is a place for the private sector within this as well.
Deputy Leader, if I could just add, and Rachel can confirm that as well as trying to get the calculations as accurate as possible, you've built in a 20% kind of buffer in arriving at those original estimations. Am I correct in understanding that?
We've built in a 20% buffer for river improvement or river betterment. In terms of the cost of the credits, I think you will find on the item 28 there in the report that there is a small amount in for contingency and risk, but you'll see that 40% of the cost of this is actually maintenance in terms of the credits, 40% build and 20% other costs.
Thank you. Are you satisfied, Councillor Lester?
Just to say that some developers are of the view that the viability issue will be on a knife edge. And the one thing that's in the back of my mind too is that changes to the Planning Act, we've already been warned about this in our planning training, that changes to the Planning Act will require even more stringent environmental regulations. Rightly so, nobody's arguing about that, but that will add to the cost of the viability. It's not just this calculation in isolation. So I think we're having to accept that developers are going to be hit from all directions by extra development costs that they wouldn't necessarily face elsewhere, or the rest will face, but in Herefordshire, they will be adding to that. So it does make developments more risky. And these essentially are going to be those developments that have had delay and cost involved in their delay. So it's something that we will have to be looking at very carefully. But I take it that, you know, there's something needs to be done, but we need to be cited on the issue, because it's going to remain an issue as we move forward. Thank you.
You're right, Councillor Lester. I mean, we have the issue of potentially lapsed planning applications. We have a building supply chain that has fallen apart and therefore will need attracting back. We have construction inflation. We have the Costa credits. We should not underestimate the support that the development sector will need to get going in the north of the county. And again, we need to be aware the why, because of the impact on Ross and Hereford if the why fails and ends up in the same sorry state.
Right. Thank you very much. And also, Councillor Lester, with my cabinet member for planning hat on, I will take your query away and see whether the mechanisms that are in place for testing viability, where developers are concerned about that, using the evaluation office and independent third parties to run the numbers, whether that's something that would be able to be deployed in these circumstances. So we'll take that away and see what the planners say. Thank you. So, Councillor Fagin.
Yes, thank you. And the Greens absolutely recognise the work that has gone into developing this, and thank everybody involved for that. And we recognise the importance of opening up the north of the county for housing development, which has been terribly knocked. However, there are conflicting views within the Green Group about about phosphate trading. There are reservations, a bit like carbon trading, that polluting practices become acceptable provided they're monetized and traded as commodities. So there are some reservations around that. And of course, the biggest issue is the elephant in the room, which is the major polluting industries in the county not actually being covered by this phosphate trading and the proliferation of IPUs within Herefordshire, which is one of the biggest issues that faces the Wye Valley SAC. So we need to continue working on ways in which we can engage good agricultural practice to ensure that we can actually save the River Wye, which is in extremely dire straits. Natural England are, they're saying that it's on a knife edge. There are people who would say that actually we've gone past that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fagin. Councillor Ginman.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. On behalf of Independence for Herefordshire, there's quite a few points that I've raised with Rachel Joy, and thank you very much for your replies to date. I do look forward to the scientific paper that you are saying is going to be coming forward, because as you know, I've raised various issues about the whole science of this that I would certainly like to be able to review and understand. And thank you very much for that. I think one of the things that I'm not totally clear on, and I'd be grateful just looking at this paper, is does this apply to all developers throughout the whole county, or only in the lug area? Because it doesn't actually define it in the paper. It talks about the lug, but it doesn't say that it applies to all developments in Herefordshire. And I just wanted to determine whether or not that was the intention. I mean, you've quite rightly said that other rivers are already in a state that is questionable and getting close to the limits, certainly the limits that are related not only to our internal laws, but to the Dutch case. And I'm very well aware from the citizen science project that's being carried out in the south of the county, and having now got the permits and the figures from local sewage farms that are actually discharging above the limits. And I therefore wonder if it was your intention that this would be applied to all developers and all developments in Herefordshire.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ginman, and I look forward to, as soon as the paper's available, I will arrange a briefing with you to go through the science. I'm more than happy to do that, and sorry about that we will have to wait for the report line that I gave last night. In terms of where it applies, at the moment, the only part of the Lug Y SAC that is considered to be failing is the 9 miles north of its confluence with the Y. So that's the only part. It's the 9 miles of the Lug. I think it's south of Mordiford Bridge, that area there, Morton on the Lug. That section is considered to be failing. So because that is failing, everything in the Lug flows through that part of the river network, and we haven't been able to have development within the north of the county because of that. So this report is about that particular area, which is why I've only talked about the Lug. The Y is not considered to be failing yet, and that would not necessarily be a decision for us. We would need advice from Natural England on that. So as yet, it won't apply to developments on the Y. We're not being required to mitigate, despite all of our views, which may be different or close, on how close the Y is to failure. We're not legally required to mitigate at this stage.
Thank you very much for that reply. Obviously, I'm going to express concern that we're going to, I mean, these are two papers in two parts, and unlike carbon credit trading, this is not carbon credit trading. This is a very different form of trading that you're setting up. And it is an attempt to ensure that there's no discharge into a water supply above the level that should be accepted. Now, it does rather imply from what you've just said that any development elsewhere will still have the potential to discharge above that level. And I think there would be considerable concern, certainly from my group, and I suspect from others, that that message is not one that we feel very comfortable with hearing.
I don't think anybody is comfortable with increased phosphate levels. I go back to the point that I made earlier. We're estimating that from our first site, 200 kilograms will be removed. 40 will then be put back into the river for 40 of that will be reserved for river betterment. 160% of that, 160 kilograms, will be released to help development. So the river will be slightly better because of this measure. It will be no worse because of this measure. But it is for polluters, some of whom are wanting to do things about it, others not, to come to the table and play their part.
Thank you.
Councillor Harvey, if I can just add that you know, it is not up, unfortunately, to a council to decide on the whether a river is failing or not. Sadly, it is the job of the statutory agencies, and until that happens, we can't commit funds in this voluntary mitigation that we've taken, you know, that we have agreed to do and are desperately trying to do. And just in relation to the point that Councillor Lester made around viability, you know, it is a fair point, but the alternative is no building. So we need to be able to make sure it works.
Thank you, Councillor Harrington. Now, I can't pass up the opportunity with us being fortunate to have Councillor Swinglehurst in the room with us, wearing a scrutiny hat, to offer her the opportunity to say something as chair of the Nutrient Management Board.
And thank you very much, Councillor Harvey, for the opportunity, which I do appreciate. So first of all, I'm going to congratulate everyone involved with getting this, you know, over the line. It's enormously complex, this piece of work, and as Rachel said, it's in some ways it's absolutely pioneering. And when you're doing something for the first time, it's very difficult. So, you know, congratulations to all the officers, and particularly to Rachel for getting it over the line. And also when we're sort of name checking, I'm going to name check Mark Willimont, whose work in the early stages of this was absolutely crucial. And also Simon Evans, who's the CEO of WIASC Foundation, who was the first person to mutter the words constructed integrated wetland. And he and I and Mark Willimont and Rob McGuinness kind of plodded around a lot of soggy fields some time back, looking at the potential to do something. It's really exciting to see it now coming to fruition. Obviously, the Nutrient Management Board is concerned principally with the nutrient management in the rivers. The planning issue is conjoined. It's obviously terribly important, but it's really the betterment, the river betterment is where my focus would lie. I would just ask for clarification if possible. If 20% is the minimum, given the performance of constructed integrated wetlands is dependent on a number of different factors. If the wetland performs better than expected, will the additional betterment go to the river or onto the trading platform? So it's, if we do better than we think we're going to, I think Rachel will probably know the answer to that because she's all over the performance of these things. So that would be a question. But really, overall, congratulations for getting it into a reality. Well done.
Thank you, Councillor Swinglehurst. From the recommendations, 20% will always be guaranteed for betterment. So if we get, say, 250 kilograms out, then the additional 50 kilograms, 10 will be reserved for betterment, 40% will go into credits, because we have to be mindful of the fact that it is getting Britain Building funding, it's LEP funding, and we thank the LEP for their contributions to date, that is helping to progress this as well.
Indeed. And thank you very much, and thank you everybody for the comments and questions that you've asked through this coverage of these two reports. Very important. Right then, if I can bring us back to recommendations, I'll take the nutrient report first. And there is a correction to the text of the second recommendation, so I will read them both out. The recommendation on nutrient certainty is first to note the progress that's been made to create integrated wetlands and to determine nutrient certainty, and B, to receive a further report as soon as practicable, and when all reasonable due diligence has been completed, to consider whether nutrient certainty has actually been achieved. So that's kind of pointing ahead to what will happen next. So for Cabinet members in the room, can you please indicate in favour of those two recommendations? Thank you. That's carried. Right. The second report on the phosphate credit pricing and allocation policy, there are a lot of recommendations on this. They go A through to I. I just want to check with Cabinet members in the room, are you content that you have read and understood those so that I don't have to read them all out? Good. Okay. Are you also content that we take them on block? Right. Okay, good. So those recommendations A to I on item 8, phosphate credit pricing and allocation policy. Cabinet members in the room, can you indicate those in favour? Yay, excellent. Thank you very much. Now, if it's all right with everybody, could I propose a 5-minute loo break? And where are we now? We're at 22, so let's be generous and say back at 4:30. That's time enough to boil a kettle with only enough water for 1 cup in it.
Okay.
Thank you. And we're all mostly back present and correct after the break. Right, now we have on to agenda item 9, which is the energy rebate discretionary fund. So this is to approve the energy rebate discretionary fund scheme and the criteria for the allocation of the funding. It begins at page 85 in the published agenda pack. Now, this is my report as Cabinet Member for Finance to introduce, and the report outlines how we propose to distribute this additional funding to households which do not qualify for the government scheme that has been introduced already. Paragraph 14 of the report details the proposed allocation approach, and I'd like to thank our officers for their careful consideration given in arriving at the proposals before us today. Due to the busy nature of today's agenda and the amount of time that the earlier agenda items have rightfully taken, I propose that for Cabinet, this report is taken as read without comment from Cabinet members. And I'd like to move straight to comments from group leaders, if I may. So with your consent, Cabinet members, Councillor Lester.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Yes, I mean, initially we welcome the rebate to council taxpayers from Band A to D. That's the right thing to do, and that's government acknowledging the cost of living challenges that we're all facing, and so we welcome that initiative. But of course, we also recognise and really appreciate the discretionary element that can be targeted towards those who live in properties beyond Band D. It would be a mistake to presume that just because an individual or families live in higher banded properties, that they also have a disposable income that is equal to the challenges that the cost of living has thrown at them. So this is great to have this discretionary element to it, and we welcome that. Just the one question we have was, which we were not entirely clear from the papers, is will the discretionary element be targeted via the benefit system that we are already aware of, or will there be greater promotion of this to ensure that people who could apply will be able to be or encouraged to apply? Thank you.
My understanding is that we'll have a comms plan that that is rolled out alongside this, so that we raise people's awareness of this on social media platforms and by other means. It's always tough, and it's particularly tough to get to the least well off amongst us who don't necessarily have access to some of the ways of communicating that that better off households do. But we will have an appropriate comms plan, and we'll be considering that as part of the equality assessment. Anything more, Councillor Lester? No, I think, well, you are, it's now Councillor Ginman for Independence for Herefordshire.
Thank you very much. Clearly welcome this, necessary, good to see it targeted as it is. I'm very well aware of the amount of work that officers have had to do to what looks simple in the first place, but I'd just like to acknowledge the amount of work that's been done behind the scenes to actually try and make this work. It's all very well when the headlines come up, but by golly, it does mean a lot of scratching your heads and trying to work out how to make the things work. And you know, well done to those who finally got round it. I fear today's announcements are going to give them another headache to work out how on earth they're going to manage some of those. So well done, and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much, and yes, thank you, Amy and Andrew and the team for putting heads together and working your way through this. Hopefully, we've got some good foundation thinking in place for whatever it is that's coming at us next, and how we most effectively and efficiently and speedily get that money out to people who will need it through the autumn. Thank you very much. So with that, we'll go to the recommendations, which are that Cabinet the energy rebate discretionary fund scheme and the criteria for the allocation of the funding is approved, and B, that all operational and budgetary decisions regarding this scheme be delegated to the Director of Resources and Assurance. So Cabinet members in the room, can you indicate those in favour of adopting those recommendations? Thank you very much. Excellent. Right, let's see how we get on with item number 10 as we try and speed things up a bit. This one is a Herefordshire County Business Improvement District advance request. So this is to seek approval for an advance loan of up to £210,000 in 2022-23 to be provided to the Herefordshire County Business Improvement District Limited to enable the company to become operational until such time as the council, as their billing authority, can commence collection of the 2% business rates levy across their county membership. So this item begins at page 95 of the agenda pack. Please also note that there is a correction to recommendation A, which has been published today on the website and on mod.gov for Cabinet members and councillors to see. Councillor Chowns, would you please introduce this item for us?
Thank you, and I hope this won't be controversial, because this is the council effectively repeating a facility that was previously extended to the Hereford City bid when it was set up. Essentially, decision was taken by votes of eligible tourism and independent retail businesses in November 2021 to set up a county-wide business improvement district, and eligible businesses will now pay a 2% levy on their business rates to fund the implementation of the bid, and that will be collected along with business rates by the council. Now, because it will take a little while to get the business rates and the levy collection going, the bid company has requested an advance of up to £210,000 to pay for initial setup costs and continue marketing activity to promote visits to the county, which has been very successful. And there is basically no risk on the part of the council. We are the levy collectors anyway. The amount requested is half of the levy that's due for this year. And so if we make the advance, then that will be repaid through annual levy collection processes. And nationwide, only 4% of levy payers don't pay, so business rates payers don't pay. So, there's no risk to the council's financial risk. I warmly recommend this to colleagues.
Thank you very much. I'll open this up to any Cabinet member who'd like to comment or to ask a question. No, all happy with it. Great. In that case, Councillor Lester.
Yes, thank you. I know Councillor Chowns' comments. Just the safeguard that the money will be paid back and ensure that that mechanism is in place. That's all we would want to see, and note the reasons for it. But as long as the money's paid back, then we understand fully the rationale for it. Thank you.
Thank you, and the money will be recouped by the council through the levy collection within less than a year. So yeah, that's
Thank you for that assurance. Councillor Ginman.
Yes, thank you very much. Clearly, this is something which the independents of Herefordshire are very happy to see happen, totally logical to do it. And yes, recouping the money is understood. Thank you very much. Let's get on with it.
Excellent. Well, in that case, let's turn swiftly to the recommendations themselves. which are that Cabinet approve a short-term 0% loan of up to £210,000 in 2022-23 to the Herefordshire County Bid Limited. And this is the amendment text, in case you haven't picked it up, to be paid on commencement of operating agreement and repaid within the financial year through collection of the levy by the council as the billing authority. And then B, to delegate to the Section 151 officer, following consultation with the Cabinet member, Environment and Economy, all operational decisions in relation to the payment and to the recovery of the loan. So those are the two recommendations, and Cabinet members in the room, can you indicate those in favour of adopting those recommendations? Thank you. Excellent. Right. I think we're on the last agenda item. We took item 11 at the front of the meeting for anyone who didn't join us from the outset and is still with us now. And item 12 on our agenda is the Q4 budget and performance report. So this is to review performance for Q4, which is effectively the full financial year outturn for the council for the financial year 2021-22, and to provide assurance that progress has been made is being made towards delivery of the agreed revenue budget and service delivery targets, and that the reasons for major variances or potential underperformance are understood and are being addressed to the Cabinet's satisfaction. This item begins on page 193 of the published agenda pack. Please also see the correction that was published on the 23rd of May. Where I think some column headings were swapped about. This report is mine, again, to introduce as Cabinet Member for Finance, but it properly belongs to us all as the summary of the Council's financial and business outturn for the financial year, which has just come to a close. And I'm really just lost my page on here. I'm really pleased to be able to present this report to you, which summarises the financial performance and outturn of the council. And what a year it's been. This financial year was always going to be a tough one, as we were facing delivery of the largest in-year savings target that this council has ever had to face under any colour of administration, standing at over £11 million. Added to this, the challenges to our communities, our businesses, our partners, our own services brought by COVID continued through the year, alongside further challenges in our needing to find a way forward to a new normal and to make the positive strides to begin the long journey towards economic recovery. At Q3, in the dark days of yet another winter lockdown, we were facing the prospect of an overspend of nearly £1 million by the year end. And I'm pleased and hugely grateful to all of our staff to be in the position today to present the final outturn for the year, which shows an underspend of nearly £550,000, as stated in paragraphs 2 and 3 of the report, rather than the incorrect figure, which is stated on page 1 of the report. As can be seen in the top level figures presented in paragraph 3 on page 2 of the report, the impact of COVID has been felt across most of our Cabinet portfolios. And as a council, we are very grateful for the additional COVID grant support to our services that we've received across the year from central government, which has gone a long way towards meeting the additional costs that we have incurred. I'll leave my Cabinet colleagues to talk about their areas of responsibility, but I will highlight the impact that COVID continues to have on our ability to deliver across elements of our capital programme, for which I'm responsible overall, and which is reflected in the 1.1 million underspend in the Treasury management area. And this is caused by a reduced in-year borrowing requirement and the impact that the development moratorium and economic slowdown has had on the income expected from processing our planning applications, which you can see on the planning line. We've also made significant progress, however, in improving the way in which Section 106 monies are planned and handled, alongside addressing performance and value for money issues in the management of our public realm contract. Continued investment across corporate services in improved project management, 21st century digital systems, contract management, and in the council's core legal team continues to pay dividends in addressing past weaknesses, improving delivery and providing timely advice to service areas. With that there, I'll pause and hand over to Cabinet colleagues to allow them to make their comments on their portfolio areas. Colleagues, who's going to leap in first? Councillor Crockett. And then Councillor Chowns.
Thank you, Chair. Well, yes, you summed it up really. What a year. During 21-22, community and wellbeing and adults and health have delivered against the council's delivery plan. We've accepted and managed the challenges of these new projects, and we have many to show you. We have delivered an outturn of just under 7 million under spend. This includes delivering savings of 3.27 million, 100% of our target in the learning disability and continuing healthcare service areas. We've successfully retendered the £10 million per annum domiciliary care contract, and those services are never appreciated as much as they should be. So please, take that on board. We've delivered 54, probably 55 by today, talk community hubs. We've delivered and embedded into business as usual with the the holiday activity funds, providing food and activities to many children in the communities. And this will be continuing next week in the half term. We've relaunched the Talk Community website and put Talk Community at the heart of Herefordshire. So we have supported the third sector with millions of pounds of COVID and community grants, such as Money on Your Mind, helping communities and the local economy recovery from the impact of COVID. Again, we have supported the care sector with millions of pounds worth of COVID grants, paying care workers a well-deserved £500 bonus each. We've launched the Herefordshire Cares website and recruitment marketing campaign, and that is gathering traction. We've compassionately managed the unfortunate closure of 2 care homes, finding new, safe and high quality homes for the individuals and families that were impacted. We continue to work closely with Wye Valley Trust to safeguard discharges and hundreds of people from that hospital setting back into the community, with the majority returning home via discharge to assess. We've continued to meet all of our obligations under the Care Act, including assessing, reviewing and safeguarding hundreds of vulnerable people. We work collaboratively with the NHS, and we also help them with their continuing healthcare packages and Section 117 guidance documents. All of this has been achieved whilst managing a COVID pandemic, and my hat goes off to the many officers in this directorate for their continued hard work. Finally, I'd just like to say this is Mr. Paul Smith's final cabinet meeting before he leaves us. Therefore, I'd like to voice my appreciation, thanks and gratitude for his continued commitment to this directorate and this council. As we all know, it's been another tough year, and he has driven with clear direction on this rocky road. Paul, I wish you well in your future plans, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor. That's much appreciated.
Councillor Chowns.
Thanks, and yes, Paul, thanks very much from me too. Absolutely. So I'm really pleased to be able to just briefly summarise performance in the economy and environment areas, which are in my portfolio. This is from page 196 on the report, and also the delivery plan kind of summary pages from 243 and 246. I'll just kind of touch on a few highlights, I think. Overall performance has been really, really good. For example, we've got the Market Town investment plans now, which kind of helping to make concrete our ambition to make sure that investment is kind of spread throughout the county as a whole. We've made really good progress on our council-led town investment plan schemes at Maylords and the Hereford Museum and Art Gallery, and actually there was a brilliant presentation just last night of the plans for those. Full business cases will be submitted in June 2022 for that, and I know that there's very exciting progress been made by the whole set of proposals from a range of different organisations all across the city. We've had some really innovative work done in the last year as part of our COVID recovery plan, which I'm really pleased about. So, for example, we had the Shop Local scheme, which provided these prepaid cards, £25 in the end, to 59,000 households in Herefordshire. Had a fantastic impact on the local economy, benefiting thousands of local businesses. And of course, we've supported more than 100,000 free bus journeys. Perhaps John, my colleague, is going to talk about those. But again, as part of the COVID recovery funding, we've been able to do that. And of course, set up new car clubs as well, which have enabled people to have easier access to vehicles in Leominster, Foundhope, Kington and in Belmont. And I know that there are more in the pipeline there. We've invested hundreds of thousands in rejuvenating town centres through the Great Places to Visit project, and we've cracked on with the broadband rollout. You know, we're now at a period where it's really difficult because it's the hardest to reach premises that haven't been got to yet, but we're 100% committed to making sure that 100% of households in Herefordshire get super fast broadband as quickly as possible. I'm also really pleased, and it's shown in the delivery plan dashboard as well. It's actually one of the first items in there that we've really changed the way that we've been communicating. So we've actually made a real effort to kind of reach out. We've got a monthly blog, we've got quarterly business update meetings, and 6 monthly meetings in all of the market towns where we kind of rotate around all the market towns, really making sure that we're reaching out into the community and making ourselves available, listening to the concerns of local businesses. So I think that really kind of demonstrates that we're an administration that's very keen to build those relationships and help boost the local economy. And of course, I couldn't not mention the fantastic work that's been done to support the visitor economy in particular. I'm really excited. In a few weeks' time, we're going to have the relaunch of the Herefordshire Trail, with it being walked in 15 sections all together on the same day on the 17th of June, which is a fantastic kind of jewel in the walking opportunities that we've got in Herefordshire. We've got so many beautiful areas to explore and paths to discover. And then just briefly onto the environment part of my portfolio. Of course, in the last year, we conducted the first ever Citizens Climate Assembly in Herefordshire, the first ever Citizens Assembly in Herefordshire, which came up with a fantastic set of recommendations that we've now taken action on at a recent, in fact, at the last Cabinet meeting, we approved expenditure in response to those recommendations to address the climate crisis. And that links with things that we already had in our delivery plan. So not only are we reducing our own council carbon footprint down 60% on the baseline and on track to be zero carbon by 2030, but we've also really put in place a whole bunch of activities to kind of reach out into the county as a whole and mobilise the whole county community. We set up in the last year the Climate and Nature Partnership Board. We set up the Greener Footprints campaign, warmly encourage everybody to sign up to the Greener Footprints campaign and make any commitment that you can to reduce your own carbon footprint. And of course, we've got the 30 for 2030 business initiative going on at the moment as well, involving local businesses and sharing their inspiring journeys of transition to zero carbon through that. We're well on the way with development of nature strategy, and of course the funding that we discussed at the last Cabinet meeting is going to help us move further and further towards our ambitions to ensure that we enable local people to do up their houses in order to reduce the fuel price rises that in fact we've just been discussing under a previous agenda item as part of the cost of living crisis, because the best way to make sure that we're less vulnerable to those fuel price increases is to ensure that our homes are more and more energy efficient. So I'm delighted that recently we've consulted on improving environmental building standards, and that is really tightly woven into the work that we're currently doing on preparing for a revision of the core strategy. I'll stop there, but I warmly commend the progress that's been made in both my environment and economy areas of my portfolio, and really want to thank everybody in the teams and the wider council teams as well for everything they've done to contribute towards that. Thanks.
Thanks, Ellie. Anybody else? Ange, Councillor Tyler.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Yes, there's a lot been going on in the portfolio areas. I'm very pleased to say that we are still delivering our strategic housing in terms of affordable homes across the county, thanks to Hayley and the team, where we're negotiation developing through Section 106 contributions and affordable units. We have got some concerns in the economy and environment in terms of the registration services and a few other parts as well. But I would like to really say thank you to the team, the Environmental Health Standards, because of their continued work behind the scenes. They continually supporting everybody, and it's also an area that there's a lot of worries about resources and finances, so it's still my concern there. In terms of the Safer Street funding, we were very pleased to have that come through on the bid 4, so that will help increase our number of CCTV cameras, making areas safer for especially for women and young girls in our area. So that's going through with the police and obviously the Community Safety Partnership. But I just say thank you to all my officers for everything they are doing through tough times from COVID and going forward. So I'm really looking forward to this year and bringing more good news through my portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you, Ange. Councillor Harrington.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. And I just want to add my thanks as well to Paul Smith and wish him best of luck in his new role. I won't go through everything in detail. It's a mixed bag. The positives that we've had this quarter have been further work and the very close to delivery position we've achieved with the phosphates and the wetlands. We've been able to bring public rights of way and traffic management in-house, so TRO team and public rights of way team are now in-house. We hope that will allow us to have much more collaborative working with the volunteers, which is a way of trying to make sure that we maximise the restricted funding that we have, or the reduced funding that we have, and that's looking promising, although there are some teething problems as we have moved into that new arena. We've also got a strategic transport director who is making very good progress in helping to establish the long overdue master plan for Hereford City and also for Herefordshire in terms of our transport, understanding it, making sure it's connected and coherent, something that we haven't really had before. And in relation to that, we've also taken the first step in commissioning, we've taken the first step and commissioned consultants ACOM to do feasibility and gap analysis work on the eastern crossing, and I hope that'll be the first step in an accelerated process. The negatives, that parking income remains low, and that's a struggle as parking income is used to subsidise other services within the directorate. Generally, we face challenges in funding. The annual plan was delivered, it was tight, it was budgeted and balanced, but it is, continues to be, we continue to face serious funding challenges. If you consider in 2011, we probably had about £10 million spending on the public realm. And we've probably, through the annual plan, we've probably got something like just under 6 at the moment. So once again, that is always a continuing challenge, but the officers have done, and to be fair, our subcontractors have done the best to try and come up with a plan that is balanced.
Thank you. Councillor Toynbee, a real hand.
Yes, thanks. Yes, it has been a very unusual financial year, hasn't it? And as we saw back in item 9, it's involved a lot of extra work for our officers with administering some of the COVID support. And there were some quite interesting paragraphs in item 9 about the government recognising that this places an additional burden on us, but without quite giving us the sentence that we might expect after that. So there's some uncertainties still there, but I'm extremely grateful to all the officers who put in all that extra work to support our residents. As you all know, it's also been a huge year for Children and Young People's Directorate, with a lot of change, a lot of movement. I am confident that in the year that we're starting now, things will feel more stable. It's been an expensive year for Children's Directorate, and I hugely appreciate colleagues' support and understanding for that. As you know, agency workers and accommodation for young people are two huge costs for us. And in future years, these budgets will settle down. And I know that the All Age Commissioning will help with that. And in the meantime, I am confident that our investment has been well spent. I'm very pleased with the investment in schools. Most of our expenditure and our spending isn't as visible as it is in some other directorates because we're investing in people, but nothing's more important than that. A lot of progress has been made over the last year. I'm looking forward to welcoming new members of staff, and it was good to hear from Darrell about progress earlier on, and I'm very grateful to everybody in the directorate. Thank you.
Great stuff. Well, I think it's back to me because I've got a few more thank yous for my portfolio. I'd like to thank the Revenues and Benefits team in the council and also in Hoople, who worked together throughout the year, advising residents, supporting those in financial hardship, and making sure the very important task of collecting council tax and business rates is undertaken, and not forgetting distributing all the COVID grants to businesses and more recently the rebate to low council tax band households. The finance team working across the council in all service areas, the research and performance teams who crunch our data and find helpful ways to visualize it, to help inform our own decision making and to assist our partners and the public to better understand the facts and figures that underpin the nature of the county. Our IT team in the council and the counter fraud team who work behind the scenes to prevent fraud and cyber attack 24/7, and all the backroom services which keep the council ticking along and support our staff, especially through the difficult times, and there have been some difficult times during COVID. So before turning to the recommendations for this report, I'd like to take a moment to step back and thank our Chief Executive, Paul Walker, for his hard work and good humour during his first full year with Herefordshire. Well done, Paul. And there's more where that came from. And to thank Paul's management team and all staff across the council for the dedication, hard work and commitment that they've shown to public service over the last year, under the most trying of circumstances at times. I'd like to give a particular name check to our Section 151 officer, Mr. Lovegrove, who, if you'll excuse me with using an extended maritime metaphor, has run a necessarily tight ship in delivering our savings, and has seen us through some choppy waters to safe harbour at the end of the year. Finally, I couldn't pass up the opportunity to say a huge thank you to Paul Smith, our Interim Director of Communities and Wellbeing, for his directorate's excellent performance this year and his leadership in achieving that, for all the hard work and dedication in leading the team that he has, in supporting the most vulnerable of our households and residents, and in continuing to build our fantastic network of talk community hubs, and supporting the very many volunteers across Herefordshire who make those the local success stories that they undeniably are. Paul, this is your last cabinet with us before you move on to further success elsewhere. And we're very grateful for the important work that you've done, both in transforming our commissioned services and in leading the directorate. And we wish you every success in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. That's very much appreciated.
So with that, I will go to the recommendation. No, I won't. I will not go to the recommendation because it's time for Councillor Lester.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Councillor Harvey. Much appreciated. Yes, on a very serious and grateful note, I only spoke to Paul just the other day and thanked him for all of his hard work. And I would like to have the opportunity to do that publicly now and say thank you. Soldiering on under really challenging times, and I know you've got a great team with you, but thank you for showing that leadership, and you will be sorely missed. So well done, and thank you, and best of luck moving forward. And also, while we were on the subject, obviously we've got lots of officers to thank, but special mention to the Chief Executive for joining us at such challenging times, and we echo those sentiments that Councillor Harvey has expressed. Yes, we note all of the comments, and I won't repeat some of the things that have been said. Just 3 questions we have. First one, and it's probably best, well, it is addressed to Councillor Harvey, notes the movement now with 106 agreements. But the question we have, and the question I have certainly from my perspective as a ward member, is how are we going to ensure that the 106 projects that are moving forward are chiming with the communities they serve? And what are the safeguards we've got in ensuring that the projects that are going forward are what the community wants? And I'm thinking in particular of parish councils who've been encouraged to have wish lists. But my involvement is asking project officers are we confident that we're engaging fully with parish councils so that they know what they're getting and they're happy with what they're getting? That would be my first question. My second question from the group is, Councillor Harrington talked about the work to do with the river crossing, but the report says a review, but from what you're saying, Councillor Harrington, it's a feasibility study to see if the whole shebang is in that direction. So is there any idea about when that feasibility study will be available so we can pick the bones out of whether it's a goer or not? And you know where I'm coming from there. And then my last question, and it's a positive, and we really encouraged to see the growth of the community Talk Communities Hub system. That's something that we were on board with in the last administration and wanted to see flourish. But the challenging question I have is that as we're growing the target, it's always great to have momentum moving forward. But what are our plans, the county's plans, for ensuring that these Talk Community Hubs are embedded and sustainable for the long term? So those were my 3 questions.
Well, I'll start off with the 106. It's a good question to ask. I think one of the things that I've asked planners is that we have maybe a dedicated Talk Parish session on end-to-end 106 and what the various points are in the process where you can influence strategically, like now when the core strategy is being updated, maintaining your section 106 wish lists, going to all the Balfour BT workshops through the year, which help to build the annual plan and to identify what the priority projects are for maintenance in your areas. and also to be positively engaging with the planning process, both through neighbourhood plans and recognising the impact of decisions to pepper pot small developments within your community. It might be the right thing to do for your community, but you don't hit the Section 106 threshold, and it means that you could take as much, if not more, development than an adjacent community which is getting 106 because they're putting all their houses in a single development. Just understanding those the consequences of those choices as you go through neighbourhood planning, and also engaging with the planning process on individual applications. Some of those engagement points are have a really slow flash to bang, engaging in the core strategy update now. You know, we're looking at out to 2041 on that. So getting those policies right, making sure that you're thinking about what what's right for your community in policy terms. It has a very long-term effect, and it also influences your neighbourhood plans in terms of the policy framework they have to operate within. Recognising, of course, that everybody's just about to change things with some of the changes that are being proposed by Michael Gove out of the Ministry for Levelling Up, which may well change significantly what our planning landscape looks like. But operating with what we've got now, I think there are some parishes are better at engaging than others, but what I also see is that, you know, we could be better at making sure that the heads of terms agreements are shared at draft stage where they do exist for larger developments in communities, and that parishes are given a proper opportunity to comment on those heads of terms, both where they relate to important changes to the road network to open development sites up, and also what the Section 106 projects are that are proposed to come forward. But if they maintain their Section 106 wish lists and keep on top of those annually, planners are using those to inform the conversations that they have from the pre-app point in the process forward with developers and landowners, both to manage their expectations about what's going to be needed from them in terms of contributions to community infrastructure, and also to influence the drafting of the final heads of terms. So there is a lot in it. And I think having a session sort of end to end and a bit of a talk through on that, and also reminding ward members of all the different points in the process where both they and their parishes can influence on Section 106 is really important. But at the end of the day, the Section 106 decisions do stay with the senior authority and the highways authority. So we will consult, but ultimately we will have to make the final decision, and ward members will play an important part in that. It was Councillor Harrington next.
It was. Thank you, Councillor Lester. This is the feasibility. This is the first stage in the feasibility work that we need to do, and part of that does involve reviewing the work that's been done before. As you know, previous administrations under Parsons, Brinkerhoff and Amy commissioned quite a lot of work around feasibility and route identification in the east, and then made a decision not to proceed with that. So we're looking at reviewing all that information, which is somewhat, out of date in a sense, but not that much out of date in terms of actual traffic movements, perhaps slightly different in terms of climate and other considerations that we need to take that may even have made you as an administration consider that Easter River Crossing was the best thing to have done in the first place. When we have some detail on when that will be delivered, I'll make sure that we get that to you.
And finally, it was Talk Community, Councillor Crockett.
Yes, but I think, sorry, Chair. Can I carry on?
Yes.
Sorry. Could I give this final moment to Mr. Paul Smith?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. That's absolutely fine. Very happy to talk about Talk Community Hubs, of course, as always. Thank you for the question, Councillor Lester, and I can confirm that we are in excess of 60 hubs now since the report was written, and we have a hub that it's been mobilised within the county hospital at their request, which is a fantastic achievement because that will link in with A&E, etc. And hubs are being progressed within the Halo leisure centres, so there is a real growing move with these hubs now. In terms of the sustainability of them, of course, we provide seed funding for all hubs to get off the ground. And of course, we nurture them. And we have on the ground, we have in each locality, we have talk community development officers that keep in touch with the people that are running the hubs to ensure that they receive the support they require to continue to operate. And the next phases around talk community hubs is certainly that we are working closely with the NHS, linking in with the integrated care system, which begins in July. And we are moving towards a position where the community hubs will start to potentially operate in conjunction with GPs, with NHS colleagues, so that we can begin to develop diagnostic services within some hubs and also integrate talk community right into the ICS as a concept, so that all of the members of the Integrated Care Services Board are familiar with talk community concepts, supportive of the hubs, and see great opportunities within the community to further expand them. So I think this is the very start of that journey, actually, and there is a long future ahead for those hubs. I apologise, I've got a 3-year-old boy in the background who keeps making a lot of noise, but that is
delightful, Paul.
One of the functions of working at home, unfortunately. Thank you for the question, Councillor. And if I may, just thank you to Councillor Crockett for her support over the last 12 months, which has been exemplary, and we've had a very good partnership, I think, over the last 12 months, which has been very, very pleasurable and much appreciated by me as an individual. So thank you, Councillor Crockett.
Great. So, Councillor Lester, anything further from you?
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Just to come back, I think all of the points you raised about the 106 was really, yes, I understand all of that, and I think those are really good points to make. The challenge I have at the moment with 106 is that work is progressing to deliver projects, but I'm not entirely sure that what is being proposed chimes with what the parish council had in mind after they've had their wish list looked at. And what I'm asking for is officers to engage. Otherwise, there's the danger that a community might get something they didn't want. And I just want to be that conduit to ensure that whatever's being developed is chiming with what the community wants. And so any help that officers and cabinet members can do to bring that about and calibrate that in a way that I think is going to be beneficial to all would be most welcome.
Excellent. Okay, understood. I think that falls somewhere between me and Councillor Harrington, probably more Councillor Harrington's side of the fence than mine, but we'll take it away together. And if you can provide us offline with an example that we can put through the pipe, that would be hugely helpful. Right, Councillor Ginman.
Thank you very much. Just to carry on with the theme on section 106 very briefly, it's been a bit of a mess is the honest answer, I think, in the past. It's certainly not understood. And having got one of my parishes where there's a development well and truly above the numbers and no money is going to come under section 106, and trying to explain that, having had the explanation, you have to sit down with a cold towel around your head trying to understand the legalese of why we're not going to get paid any money. So I think across the board, you're absolutely right, Councillor Harvey, we've got to take this to the level of trying to explain it more to parish councils to understand it and to get through it. So 100% behind your wishes to do that. And I know that the Director of Finance has been incredibly helpful in trying to take this forward as well, and thank you very much. I'm just going to join in the general congratulations and thanks to Paul Smith. May I say thank you for all your hard work. It has been very much appreciated. by all councillors of all colours, all persuasions, and we do appreciate that. And that, I think, should be extended across all of the council work, because I think sometimes it gets lost. I thought that actually the delivery plan dashboard, when there was a person the other day who wrote in the Hereford Times, what is it that council does for us? I thought perhaps I ought to send them that, because it might give them a clue as to what actually money gets spent on, what work gets done, and what the outputs are. I was, however, just slightly concerned when I saw it was Project Nova savings. Given that in astronomy, a nova is a bright star that suddenly appears and then fades over the following months. I sincerely hope there's no fading going to occur in the implementation of all of these there in the delivery plan. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Project Nova was our massive savings program. So that is, you know, coming to a conclusion with this report. And yes, I echo your comments on the way that the council is portrayed in the press and on social media. You know, really doesn't reflect the fantastic, important, valuable, necessary underpinning work that our staff do day in, day out. And it is demoralizing to have such negative stories sometimes in the press and on social media, and the kind of comments that people make when it seems sometimes that they haven't even bothered to read the article to understand the detail before leaping in with a negative remark. Nevertheless, we soldier on. Thank you, everybody, for a really brilliant performance over the last 12 months. And turning to the recommendation, there is only one: that Cabinet, having reviewed performance and financial forecast for the year 2021-22 as set out in the appendices A to F, has not identified any additional actions to be considered to achieve future improvements. So I think that is the only recommendation for this final agenda item. So Cabinet members in the room, could you indicate those in favour of that recommendation without further amendment? Thank you. Thank you. And time for me to close the meeting. But before I do so, I'm conscious that this is the last public council meeting before the Jubilee weekend at the beginning of June. And I'd like to congratulate and thank Her Majesty for her many years of service to us all. I know that there are many events organised, large and small, across Herefordshire in celebration and commemoration of this remarkable Jubilee. And I'd like to thank the many organisers for their hard work in planning these events. And I hope that everyone enjoys the extended opportunity that the 4-day weekend brings to celebrate the service of our Queen, and the opportunity that provides for our community to come together. And I wish us all fine weather. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for attending in the room, for those on Zoom, for those members of the public who have stuck with us on the YouTube, and for anyone who's battled through the recording after the event. Our next scheduled meeting is Thursday, the 23rd of June. And with that, can I close the meeting and ask for confirmation that the live